Hi everyone, welcome to our event today on New England Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. Today we have Oscar and Maria with us to talk about the Latino experience. Next slide, please. Just some housekeeping information. Participant microphones will be muted at entry. If you do have any questions during the webinar, please use the chat or use the raise hand feature in the discussion. This session is being recorded and it will be available on the MHTTC website within 24 hours of this presentation. Information about the certificates of completion will be sent in a follow-up email to all of the registrants. And if you have any questions after the session, please email newengland@mhttcnetwork.org. And with that, I will hand it off to Maria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and welcome everybody. My name is Maria Restrepo Toro, and I am the presenter today. I am currently working as the co-director of the New England Mental Health TTC, and I work at the Yale Program on Recovery and Community Health. And it is my privilege to be presented with Oscar Rojas, which I will introduce in 1 minute. Before we start, I want to invite everybody to use respectful, affirming, and recovery-oriented language as a mental health TTC network. We really embrace strengths-based and hopeful language, inviting everybody to use first-person language free of labels and without judgments. And we're hoping to get to know you, since it's a large group, via the chat, and hopefully we can get to know each other a little bit better. So today, our topic is about inspiring and engaging Hispanic and Latinx people in recovery by using motivational interviewing principles. As I said, my name is Maria Restrepo, and it is an honor to be here today presenting to you. I've been around doing Latino behavioral work for a long, long time. Before I joined the Yale Recovery and Community Health, I worked at Boston University Center for Psychiatric Rehabilitation for many years, and really dedicated my life to adapt psychiatric rehabilitation intervention and motivational rehabilitation strategies for Latino communities. I think on a personal level, I'm also very invested in really promoting recovery-oriented practices. I believe as a Latina, as an immigrant, and what I have experienced myself and what it takes to be a Latina, as well working in this field, I believe we do have a lot of commonalities that we're here offering to share today. My colleague today is an honor to be presented with Oscar Rojas Perez. Oscar is a postdoc at the Yale Program on Recovery and Community Health, and he actually received his PhD in counseling psychology at the University of Missouri and completed his internship at the Yale School of Medicine, the Hispanic Clinic. I didn't have the privilege to meet him while I was at that time, but we're delighted to have him here. He is from Guatemala and has been in the US for since he was 5 years old. And he is done a lot of work around motivational interviewing and cultural adaptations. Oscar, I don't know if you want to say a few words and just saying hi to everybody.
Yeah, thank you everyone for hosting us and having us, and to the MHTTC for giving us this opportunity to be here with everyone. So thank you. And thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Oscar. I want to introduce, before we start in the process, this initiative is bringing to you together, and we are delighted to see so many people from around the country, from California, from Tennessee, from Philadelphia. This is amazing. What we're actually looking to do, this is an initiative that's in collaboration with two other mental health TTCs. We have and I will explain the mental health TTCs in a second, but this is is the second group that we do of this initiative, part 2 of this initiative called Partnering to Facilitate a Cultural Behavioral Health Recovery Among Hispanic and Latinos Communities. The Mental Health TTC Network, so we are partnering with the Region 1 Mental Health TTC and the National and Latino Hispanic Mental Health TTC. And we started this initiative last year when we did some listening sessions, and we learned from all the clinicians working with Latino communities, what their needs were around training. So what we're here to present to you is something we learned when we first did that information. And just to really re-emphasize, as you know, there are 10 mental health TTCs around the country and 2 national mental health TTCs. The Hispanic Latino is, as we know, is the largest minority in this group, or we are the largest minority. We can see the amount of Latinos in the Pacific Southwest area, high numbers as well in the region, Northeast Caribbean, and around the country there's large percentages of Latino. So it is really about time for us to be talking about recovery-oriented practices and what that means for our Latino community. So what Oscar and I have to do today is really, we hope to cover the following 3 things. First, we want you to learn about what are the ingredients of our recovery-oriented systems of care. And we are going to be explaining what recovery is. This is one of the findings. People needed to understand a little bit more, perhaps the difference between recovery-oriented practices and clinical treatment. So we want you to understand recovery is a non-linear process, and that the goal of recovery-oriented practices is to help individuals achieve a meaningful life in their communities. And third, we are going to be, Oscar is going to be talking a little bit about motivational improvement principles, and we're going to see how we're going to merge that together and give you an example of, for instance, person-centered recovery planning as a tool to engage Latinos in this process. We understand by saying the word Hispanic, Latinos, Latinx in these presentations, we understand that we're coming from many different places. There's a lot of diversity among the different states, the different countries that we cover, because not only North America, Central America, South America, so we understand and respect that despite the fact that we are using this as a main category, we understand and we're going to address the fact that everybody is an individual and has a unique identity in this process. So I want to start first with first, what is the difference? What is the difference between recovery from and recovery in? And the reason this is important is when we first did this initiative and we have these listening sessions, we learned that for some people that wasn't necessarily clear. So it is really, and they're all very important, both very important. Both recovery and treatment go hand in hand. And that's what we're here to present to you today. So recovery from actually is a very important aspect, because when I am recovery, especially when I'm speaking Spanish, de la recuperándome de algo, recovering from, we are thinking about, in many cases when we're doing treatment, is eradicating the symptomatology of a disease, right? It can be a physical disease, an emotional disease. Sometimes we want to kind of do these symptoms and then I feel better because I don't have the symptoms anymore. Being in recovery, it is more of a process, okay? It's a process that refers to the individual person learning how to live a dignified life. It's a process that entails that somebody accepts who they are, where they are, and the condition they are living with. So it's very important to understand the difference between recovering from and recovering in. Okay, why is that important? Because when we're talking about recovery-oriented practices, we do know that people, regardless of the diagnosis that people may have, and I'm talking about behavioral health diagnosis, whether it's addiction and mental illness or both, or concurrent disorders, we do know that people want what they want. So they may have a diagnosis, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to try, they don't want to survive. Sometimes we see this much easier when we talk about people that have physical diagnosis, for instance, that they don't necessarily become the illness. Somebody a diabetes, for instance. Maybe they have the illness of diabetes, but they are not the diabetes itself. There are people with a condition. So it's very important. One of the characteristics of our recovery-oriented practice, and I think overlaps with it, how motivational interviewing values and principles are built on, is these principles that people want to thrive, and recovery is a process that belongs to the person. It's a process that does not belong to the clinician. The clinician is maybe there to treat the person or the illness, but these kinds of process, we are in recovery trying to work with people's aspirations. And in our community, Latino community, clearly we know that working with the family is very important. So there is a transition, and in this recovery-oriented world, we're looking to really partner with the person and the family to achieve this process. So partnering is a very important process of all of this. So when one is being in recovery, as I was saying in the earlier slide, it's about really the individual making sense of their experience and learning maybe perhaps how to live with the illness, like somebody who maybe has a fatal accident and now has a spinal cord injury and needs to live in a wheelchair. They eventually need to learn, they may accept eventually to the difficult reality they not be able to walk again, but they need to learn how to live this. So this parallel of rehabilitation is very well known in the physical world, but when we're talking about emotional disabilities that are more invisible disabilities, it's very hard sometimes to understand the concept of rehabilitation. Being in recovery, as I said, belongs to the individual. It means having a personal world sense of people as persons first and foremost, not as a diagnostic category. And it's really about remaining the hope. And this is why we wanted to talk to you about inspiring, because one of the things we learn and we know for a fact is the difficulty in engaging because of the stigma issues that will be discussed next week, engaging Latinos perhaps in this process. So we want to be able to really address these issues with you today. So a very important fact of recovery too is, as I said, and this is a definition that's coming from by SAMHSA, is all about exploring life after beyond the illness, right? It's about being able to have a home, finances, friends and family, hobbies, education, spirituality, community, mental health, addiction, treatment, physical health. So it's about like a balanced, holistic perspective. With that said, it's important that you understand that treatment is also a big part of this process. It's a matter of working with the person and framing that treatment in a way that's going to help that individual discover a meaningful life and really being able to function in the community of their choice. So this is an important definition for recovery, and I think the New England Mental Health TTC, as being one of the partners in this initiative, has a wonderful set of principles around resilience and recovery that is not the focus of this presentation, but I want to just kind of address, because I think the values here are very much aligned with those of some of the Latino communities that we work with. They are based on respect, respeto, personalismo, simpatía, familismo. It's about really a hope. It's about family and person driven. It's about understanding that individuals have many different paths of recovery, and they are definitely influenced by cultural values and beliefs. And it's very important to address recovery, because there's not going to be recovery if we don't think about the cultural strengths that we all bring to these processes. So I just invite you to get familiar with our principles, and we are going to be really now transitioning to Oscar and talking a little bit about motivational interviewing and how that's such an important aspect of engaging people. Oscar?
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. Can everyone hear me? We're good? Great. Well, thank you for getting us started. And in the next couple of minutes, I will try to do my best to not only integrate motivational interviewing principles, also integrate the person-centered recovery approach along within a Latinx context. And I will use the Latinx term moving forward. So Before we move to the core principles of motivational interviewing and how they can be integrated into person-centered recovery care, we want to briefly touch on the Transtheoretical Model, which I'll refer to as the TTM from here on out. Although not related to motivational interviewing, we decided to include this slide as a reminder for those of us who are engaging in working with Latinx clients from a person-centered recovery approach that change from recovery to being in recovery is not a linear process, right? There isn't the first step, second step, third step, fourth step. That doesn't exist. In an ideal world, that would be phenomenal. And as providers, we know that's not how therapy works. The second thing is that, and I will emphasize this multiple times, that change is not a product, but instead it's a process. And I'll say that again, that change is not a product. You just don't achieve it, right? It's a lifelong term process. And the part of it, and what makes it sometimes challenging is that sometimes there is no endpoint, right? Because it's a process in itself. And finally, it may take time for us and our clients to get used to and get comfortable to the idea of working from a recovery center approach, right? The idea of being in recovery versus from recovery. And that may cause some uncertainty or some uncomfortableness, not only amongst us, also with our Latinx clients. In addition, it is important to recognize that it's possible that the shift from recovery to being in recovery and also being in a collaborative partnership with providers may prompt uncertainty in our clients, simply because they may have never had an experience of working in a collaborative relationship. It may be new to them, right? So this idea of asking a Latinx client to think about and engage with you in this process of developing a treatment plan, that may be new to them, right? They may be used to going to a provider and the provider being an expert and then the provider telling them what to do. And maybe that's what they're used to. So this idea of being in a collaborative and type of relationship may be new. And they also may have very limited experience or no experience in person-centered recovery care. One of the other reasons why we included this in the presentation earlier on is because oftentimes the TTM is used to assess our clients' readiness for change, right? We use it to see where our clients are so that way we can intervene, use the right intervention, use the right MI strategy, or use whichever effective strategy we want to use. However, a key point to the TTM is that it can be used for us as providers to assess where we are in this process, right? And the reason that I say that is because oftentimes as providers, we tend to be in an action stage. Most of the time, we're ready to go. We have our foot on the gas pedal. We're ready to just go and make things happen. It makes sense. We want to help our clients overcome whatever challenges, whatever presenting concerns they're experiencing, whatever stressors. We're helpers by nature, and we simply want to help. So it makes sense why most of the time we are probably in the action stage. However, it's important to recognize that if we're on a different stage and our client is on a different stage, then that mismatch in stages may create discord. And that discord itself may lead to disengagement. And that disengagement may prompt the client to never return back to treatment in itself, or even want to engage in treatment. So it's important for us to not only be able to recognize where our clients are, also where we're at, right? So take, for example, if we're in an action stage and we start trying to help our clients understand or start talking about what it means to live with a presenting concern, and the client is not even aware of the presenting concern, that mismatch is going to lead to discord, and that discord is going to prompt disengagement, and that client may not come back. All right, so that's that possibility of not being on the same stage that we can lose our clients. So in sum, it's effective to use the TTM to identify where we as providers are in our approach to treatment in itself, and also into person-centered recovery care, and use MI technical skills to get on the same stage with our clients and vice versa, right? So once we're on the same stage, then we're able to move forward with the treatment plan. Next slide. So what is motivational interviewing? As defined here, motivational interviewing is a collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment to change. And I will repeat this 2 times. MI is done for and with the person, and it's not done by an expert to a passive client, right? This really speaks to the collaborative nature. It's done for and with the person and not by an expert and an expert to a passive client. It's very critical for us to keep that in mind. Quick background on motivational interviewing: it's highly recognized across various disciplines. It has been cited over 25,000 times, translated into multiple different languages, implemented in work with children, adults, individuals with substance use concerns, individuals with gambling problems, etc. You name it, MI has been implemented in various disciplines and various types of treatment interventions. And its effectiveness has been investigated in over 14,000 randomized clinical control trials, therefore suggesting that there is significant amount of information and data to back up its effectiveness. Next slide. So now let's briefly touch on the MI spirit. And as you see here, the MI spirit is made up by these 4 domains: partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. Now, these domains are not unique to motivational interviewing. You see them in dialectical behavioral therapy, emotion-focused therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, you name it. You've come across any of these domains in any type of intervention that you probably have used. However, what makes them very unique to MI is the union of these 4 domains, which create the MI spirit. So when we think about partnership, it's an act of collaboration between 2 experts. And this is key here, right? And this speaks to the recovery-oriented care approach, which is person-centered, that it's this collaborative and this partnership is between 2 experts: the patient who's an expert in their lived experience in their lives, and the provider who's the expert in the intervention. Right? So it's the union of 2 experts coming together and working alongside. As mentioned earlier, this partnership, this collaborative partnership, is not expert-driven or hierarchical. So the provider is not above the client or vice versa, right? It's the union of 2 collaborative people who have expertise in their own areas. As providers, all we're doing is we're simply coming as companions. We're joining our clients in the recovery journey, right? We're very fortunate that we're being allowed to enter the space, right? It's quite an honor for us to be welcome into the space of our clients. So all we're doing is simply joining them in the recovery journey. When we think about acceptance, it's an attitude of profound acceptance for what the client brings. And this is really key here. We honor each person's absolute worth and potential as human beings. We accept clients knowing that they are doing the best that they can and that they can do better, which is also a key principle in dialectical behavioral therapy, right? Clients are doing the best that they can, and yes, there is room for improvement, and it's our role to evoke that, right? As providers, and this is important for us to know, that as providers, it is much easier for us to work with and accept with someone who is in an action stage, someone who's ready to go, someone who already has a preparation plan, who is already in the car, ready to put their foot on the gas. It's much easier for us to accept and work with someone who's in an action stage than it is for us to work with someone who's in a pre-contemplative stage, who hasn't maybe come to terms or even recognizes that hey, there is a presenting concern, or hey, that there is an area of growth. So I think as providers, it's also important for us to recognize that. We also demonstrate acceptance by embodying accurate empathy or deep empathy, which simply means making an effort to understand our client's worldview. It doesn't mean that we have had to have lived a similar experience to understand. It simply means making an effort, right? An effort to understand where they're coming from, their worldview. And this is also very key here. We accept non-judgmentally. We don't make assumptions based on our client's diagnoses or their lived experience, right? And lastly, when we think about tapping into our client's intrinsic motivation, they already have that, and it's our role as providers to evoke that. Next, when we think about compassion, it's a deliberate commitment to pursue the welfare and the best interest of our clients, right? At the end of the day, we're working with them, and therefore their best interest is, we have their best interest. The key thing here is that research has suggested that compassion may be one of the most significant predictors in behavior change. Compassion can really take you a long way, and it can really help establishing that working alliance. It really can really help build that relationship and strengthen it on multiple levels. Lastly, when we think about evocation, it's a strength-focused premise rather than a deficit model approach. Here, we want to focus and understand the person's strengths and resources. rather than what they lack, what they don't have, what's wrong with them, or what's missing. We don't want to focus on that. Many of the providers they've worked with, or many people that they've encountered, really focus on that. So it's our role and our responsibility to build from their foundation that they already have, which is strengthen the resources. The assumption in MI is that clients truly do have the wisdom about themselves and have a good reason for doing what they have been doing for so long. Next slide. Now, let's shift and talk about the MI processes and see how we can weave them into the two different contexts, into a recovery and the Latinx context. And as you see here, it's important to note that the MI processes are not a linear process, and they're not a step-by-step guide on how to do motivational interviewing. These processes, you see them and you engage them at different times, right? It doesn't matter if you're in the first, 10th, 25th session, you will use these interchangeably. So when we think about engagement, engagement naturally comes first because we have to have good engagement prior to having a conversation about change, right? If a client's not engaged, you're not going anywhere. We want to develop a strong working alliance. Without a strong working alliance, again, there's no treatment plan, there's no goals, there is no getting to an endpoint. It's also difficult to get into motivation without engagement, right? If at any point we lose engagement, we stop moving forward and we need to go back. So for example, say we can be in the 10th, 20th, 30th session with a client, and as soon as they're disengaged, or maybe they're in the preparation stage and they're ready to take that action, and something happens that just prompts them to be disengaged, we no longer as a team are in that preparation stage anymore. What we have to do is go back and re-engage that client in the treatment or in the preparation plan. So this is where we have to be flexible. We are orienting our Latinx clients to a new method of service delivery. So we may be re-engaging them in a person-centered recovery-oriented care approach, which again, it may be new to them, so we might have to provide that orientation. We're getting to know our clients in a different social and cultural context. Simply, what does it mean to be in recovery within a Latinx cultural context? Like, what does that mean for them? What does that mean for the family? What does it mean for their community? Here, we want to check about positive ambivalence or uncomfortableness or uncertainty around the concept about being in recovery or being in a person-centered recovery approach or care. We may want to check in with our clients and assess their level of comfort by talking about, specifically when talking about recovery. Questions that we may want to ask ourselves to know if our client is engaged is what the client saying something that they would typically say, right? This is a great way to kind of assess their level of comfort with being in recovery and person-centered recovery care. And it's also a great opportunity for us to use elicit, provide, elicit, which is a strategy in MI that elicits what the client knows about a particular topic. And then with the client's permission, again, this is key in MI, with the client's permission, we provide additional information, and then we elicit their understanding of the information that was provided. Keep in mind that in motivational interviewing, the client always has the last word. So for example, we may use elicit, provide, elicit to ask our clients, what is it that they know about being in recovery or person-centered care? Provide that space for them to share, ask for permission to share additional information, and then ask what is their understanding of it. When we think about focus, we're focusing on a recovery context, which may mean helping the client get used to being in a collaborative client-provider relationship. It may require for us to spend some time helping our client understand the difference of an expert-passive client relationship versus being in a collaborative relationship. What does that mean? What is their role, right? Because in that relationship, we're also students because we're learning about our clients and their lived experience. The agreed upon goal in the situations may be helping the client learn how to advocate for their basic needs. Maybe the focus is more on short-term goals and affirming effort when effort is shown. Maybe a great opportunity to engage in problem-solving skills. We may also want to check in and see if we're on the same stage as our client or vice versa. And before refocusing on the agreed upon goals. So again, we want to make sure that we're on the same stage before we can even try to move forward, because if we're not, movement is not happening. Questions that we may want to ask ourselves here include, have we focused too soon on the treatment plan before the client has gotten an opportunity to adjust to a collaborative nature of the relationship? Are we focused on our own agenda, right? Are we too focused on trying to make sure that the client succeeds or attains their goal? Are there other target behaviors that are more important? Next, when we want to evoke Latinx strengths, ways of coping, the ways of healing, and the ways of overcoming crises. We want to tap into past experiences of overcoming challenges. And when we do that, when we tap into past experiences, we can use that as evidence and show our clients that, hey, they have overcome challenging situations. They have that experience. They have the skills. Oftentimes, clients don't recognize that. So by us evoking these past experiences of success or past experiences of overcoming challenges, we can use that as evidence to be like, hey, here's proof that you can, right? There's proof that you have been resilient. And we use that foundation to build and add additional skills. So again, that is key. Building on past successes, past experiences can also help with building up our clients' self-efficacy and self-confidence. Right? It reminds them that they too have been successful. Next, when we're planning in a recovery context, it may require us to be very flexible. It may prompt us to revisit treatment goals and make accommodations as needed. Right? Making sure that as we're revisiting these goals, and if they need to be adjusted, we make those accommodations and adjustments together. It may even mean formatting a short-term treatment plan, and think about different types of ways we can provide support or what other supports are needed. Goal setting and the planning process may mean removing barriers. When we think about barriers, what are barriers to access to treatment, right? Especially now with majority of treatment being done through an online platform, do our clients have steady internet? Do they have access to a tablet or a phone? Do they have access to what is needed, right? So these are things that we need to be thinking and considering in this treatment plan. Also helping our clients understand what does it mean to be in a recovery and a recovery-oriented care. And here it's also very key is we want to explore additional supports or resources that our clients may need, whether that be food access, financial support, advocacy, etc. Here's where we also want to incorporate that into the treatment plan. The next slide. And I'll shift it over to Maria.
Well, thank you, Oscar. We have wonderful questions, and I will try to answer, but please jump in to say. And I think the first one has to do with the impact, really, how we maximize the impact of motivational interviewing with a person is experiencing or expressing psychosis and the reality of worldviews is not based in reality. So I did answer the question. I will answer the question in a little while as I did type it up. I don't know if you want to add. I address it once I get about setting up the goal. And we have a second question about how do we move forward with a client who's always justifying their behavior. So I wanted to refer to what Oscar started this segment, understanding that there has to be a match, and sometimes maybe the person's readiness to move forward is very different from your own expectations, so somehow that discord may happen. But I don't know, Oscar, if you want to address that specific question before we address the merging of the two concepts.
Yeah, can you repeat that question again just to make sure that I understand?
Yeah, so there's how would you help to move forward a client who's always justifying their behavior?
Great question. Justifying the behavior, and this is this question often comes up in motivational interviewing in the workshops that I've done, is that when a client is justifying the behavior, great. You don't have to engage in that. And one of the things is, like, their clients may want to engage you in that process, right? That this is where maybe they're getting that reinforcement, and as providers, we engage in that reinforcement. So we can put that aside, the justification, put it aside, and then this is where we can also use in that case, when a client is justifying, or most of the time justifying their behavior, this is where you start using some of those MI reflections. This is where you use a reflection with a twist. This is where you use an amplified reflection. This is where you use a double-sided reflection, right? So an example of a double-sided reflection can be, a client saying, justifying their behavior, and then you point out the discrepancy. So you're talking about A, and then here's B, right? So when someone is continuing to justify their behavior, you can use various types of reflection to kind of, in a way, bring to surface that discrepancy that they're experiencing. So a good example, you can say, say a client is talking about that they don't have, or that they're comfortable, and I'll refer to a substance use example here. Say that a client is saying, well, I don't have a problem drinking, and you know, it's everyone else's problem. So a double-sided reflection here can be, yeah, you don't seem to have, and this is, you're adding another part to it. It's like, oh, you don't seem to have, you don't seem to be concerned about your drinking behaviors. However, maybe your family's concerned about you, right? So then you're tying in another aspect of the client, or an amplified reflection can be simply saying like, oh, like, there's nothing wrong with your drinking at all, just that, you know, you keep getting in trouble with the law, but there's nothing wrong with your drinking, right? You're pointing out the facts here. So you're also kind of just using what they're saying. I don't really like saying it like this, but in a way, it's kind of using what they're saying against themselves. Like you're basically using their own argument against themselves. So that's where the various types of reflections come into play. Hopefully that answered that question.
Thank you. And I will address it too, I think, as a part of this presentation. So I think what Oscar and I really, as I said at the beginning, wanted to do is to provide an example, because we do understand that engaging Latino, Hispanic, Latinx, it's very hard, not only because of the stigma, but because the many cultural challenges that come. So it's very interesting that you see how both motivational interviewing and person-centered and recovery-oriented adult processes, which actually works very well culturally. So I started to do this kind of work very early on as an immigrant when I was studying here, because I was really in the values of all the psychiatric rehabilitation and recovery-oriented practices. I was really amazed how well they fit my culture and my worldview as well, as a Latino. So there is a great fit, and there are great tools that can be used in order to facilitate this process. So we're going to be here presenting you a merging of the two of them. And this is a tool developed by the Yale Program on Recovery and Community Health by Dr. Janice Sandora. It's called Person-Centered Recovery Planning. And I don't know how many of you are doing person-centered plans. I know they're very much widely mandated by many strengths, and they are just the treatment plans that people have. But what is important about this plan, not only uses motivational interviewing really as a base to engage people, it's actually very much rooted in the foundation of recovery. It is a collaborative process, actually, as Oscar was pointing out, the importance of collaborating, and the question that was asked about when we are in two different places, how we navigate that process. So this kind of tool, whether you call it treatment planning, is a great tool to actually partner, to work with the person in finding out what is the direction that they want to take on their lives. And it is important because it engages family and natural providers, which is really essential for us. It is also co-created, and at the end of the day, there's going to be a document that's being developed, and every system has different models of plans. We're only going to be talking about the values and the spirit. As Oscar just said, he talked about the spirit of motivational interviewing. I'm going to be talking about the spirit of this person-centered recovery plan. It's very important to understand that behind this kind of plans, what is different about this plan is we are really going beyond clinical stability. It's really about helping the person achieve something that's meaningful for them. Yet, treating the person's symptomatology is important. And this is why the question about the psychosis is so important, because if I put my hat as a clinician of psychiatric rehabilitation, which is my profession, I definitely know that there are times in a person's when I am engaged in a clinical relationship that an individual needs to be treated. And the goal at that specific time is to be engaged. Maybe you are treating that as psychosis. For the person, it's going to be their own reality. But engaging the person in a process, whether it's a motivational interviewing process or a recovery process, requires that the persons to be engaged. So if the person is unable or unwilling to engage, then that is not the time to be talking about these issues. This is not the time to be talking about a plan, because then the intervention is about engaging that person, okay? So it is not about disputing whether or not the person is seeing the voices or hearing the voices. It's about safety, and that's a very important outcome, but that's more of a treatment outcome versus a recovery outcome. So the beauty of a person-centered plan is actually, it also has a spirit, like the motivational interview. The spirit of the CPRP, first of all, is also based on philosophy. It has core values, as we saw. And in fact, some of the values are the same of the motivational interview. It's about the partnership. It also brings hope. It's also about emerging from the person themselves. And it has nothing to do with their illness. The illness is what's going to interrupt their process, perhaps, but it's about being una abuela, a mother, a worker. It's about the person's goal. There is a process in the person-centered planning, and that has to do with partnering, again, a motivational interviewing principle. It ends in a concrete roadmap that, as I said, and when I see people from all over the country, plans are going to look very different. But if I'm also doing a recovery-oriented plan, my recovery plan is going to start with the person's goal, not the diagnosis, not the medications that the person needs to take, but it's about what is the roadmap for recovery. And it's going to have a purpose, okay? You can check this. This is an explanation of the plan, and it's a wonderful YouTube video. All of you can download this presentation and can distribute it. And this presentation is also going to be available in Spanish and Portuguese in the near future, just so you know. That's coming up. So how we then merge those? If you go back to Oscar's 4 stages of motivational interviewing, this is a great example. So when we are talking about engaging and engaging, and in this case for our Latino communities and for us, and again, I am a proud Latina, it's about my family. My life is driven by my family. Even though I may have a personal goal of growing, I am a family-oriented. Familismo is totally part of this. So when I'm talking about these practices, I'm also talking about engaging the family member, if that's what I want and the person wants, of course. So person-centered is actually a wonderful tool, and it's all about engaging the person. As I said, and this is extremely important, there are times in a person's process that is not the time to be engaged with them if they are not in a safe situation. And at that point, the intervention, if the person is unable or unwilling to be engaged in the process, we may need to do a different intervention, because that's what clinically is being called upon, not because it doesn't work in the future. If you understand, and I think it's very important, both Oscar and I, and everybody of you, whether you are from a Latino Hispanic origin or not, or are working with Latinos, understand that Latino, Latinx, Hispanic is a label. We come from many different races, all in both in the U.S. Hispanic Americans as well as in the Central Latin American. There is a lot of aspects of diversity that impact this process. Okay, so being a Latino means many things. For me, being a Latino means being a Colombian first and foremost, and for somebody else, maybe being from California or from another place, right? We do have, as I said, different levels of abilities and disabilities. The difference with that is the stigma attached to those abilities and disabilities, especially around mental illness. There are also differences of gender and sexual orientation that are impacted our Latino experiences. Whether we live or in the urban city or in rural areas, or whether we grew up in an urban city in Latin America, and when I come here, it's a totally different experience, or vice versa. So it's so important for anybody that's trying to work with the Latino community and engage the community to understand where are they coming from. Are you coming from a town, in a very rural town in Latin America, in Mexico, in any country, and now you are in California? So level of urbanicity, not only when they come to the US, clearly immigration status is a big piece and aspect of our cultural identity. All of these things are important factors to address when we're engaging somebody in this process, as well as doing a plan with them. Acculturation, you know, the language, linguistic capacity. Before with Cole, we were talking about English as a second language. Those are huge issues of acculturation. Level of education, socioeconomic status. Did we lost economic status? Did we grow up? Did we become Latinos when we came here and not when we were growing up? All of these are going to influence our oppression experience as Latinos in the US, and it's going to really help us understand this process of the recovery-oriented plan. So that's very important to consider when we're engaging. And I think if you're attending this webinar, it's because this is something that you're probably interested in looking some ideas about that. So there are lots of tools out there, like the cultural formation and interview, and that our speakers next week would also address. So understanding, then the second piece of the motivational interview and Oscar talked about was having really a clear focus on where we're going. And I think that's in the person-centered plan, that's really important to have as the goal. Let me address the question that was asked before that Oscar addressed already. What happens if the person keeps going back to the same reality? Well, very common for us working in rehabilitation or clinical work that the person say, I have no idea what my goal is. Or I don't know. I mean, I knew when I was, you know, in Panama doing this thing, but I don't know when I'm here because I cannot work. So our identities may have lost through immigration or acculturation, but it's very important to understand that not having a goal does not mean that I cannot engage the individual in the process. Setting a goal is part of this process, but it's not right or wrong. And what we do need to use to set a goal with Latinos is actually use the motivational interviewing principles in this process, because it's about really building an alliance and partnering with the person. It is about then helping the person identify strengths as people, not as a labeled diagnostic DSM-5 category of the schizophrenic, the psychotic, XYZ. It's about understanding you as a person. What did you do when you were back in Colombia? What do you want to do now? Or what did you do now that you are in Tennessee or in Kansas? So, and it's going to be really important to reframe that. I don't have any goals, but I want a job. So perhaps the person cannot do specifically what kind of goal immediately because they haven't had an opportunity to express what a goal is. Their lives has been so upset for so many outside life circumstances, such as immigration, family disruption, and all the things that are being faced by Latino these days, that setting up a goal is not a clear process. So you, as Oscar said before, you need to be able to dance with the person and the process and try to find, so there's not a discourse. Sometimes when somebody said, I don't really know what I want to do, it's a matter of really engaging with the person and kind of doing the process together. And it's about evoking and elicit internal motivation. And I really want to address this because I know in my experience working with Latino communities for so many years, we hear this all the time. The person is unmotivated to set up a goal. It's not realistic to have this goal. He wants to be the president of the United States. What do we do about this? For this, I'm going to use the psychiatric rehabilitation approach, which is really, really founded in the kind of work that I do, and it's actually aligned. It comes actually also from motivational interviewing purposes. And this process talks really about hope, confidence, and motivation. And what we look at this when we're thinking about this process, is somebody motivated or non-motivated? The questions that the person's really asking themselves: can I really do this goal? Can I really become a worker in the US, for example? Can I really be a mom after being so depressed after having my baby? So there is a piece that has to do with confidence. Can I really do it? And there is also the hope for the future. Do I really believe that I can do this goal? So it's very important. And what about my cultural beliefs? Is this allowed for me in my culture as a woman or man or Latino man? I mean, you name it, that I can actually fulfill this role that is expected for me in the US of America. So setting goals is a little bit more complex than just label somebody motivated or non-motivated. It's about really one's identity. And if my identity has become that of being a patient, a psychiatric chronic patient with XYZ diagnosis, it's going to be really hard for me to shift that identity from being that patient and becoming the person that I want to become. So psych rehab approach brings us a lot of insight in this process, because everybody could reconnect with their own dreams. But we, if you are as a clinician, and whether you're with the family or with all they want, or with college students, everybody that's on this webinar today, you can use this kind of skills. It is your clinical responsibility to use techniques that are going to help you advance this process ahead. It's not the person's responsibility. It's your clinical experience responsibility. And it's important to understand that when we're making goals and decisions about goals, we need to understand the differences about cultural differences. Some cultures, like the one we're living in, presenting, and we are here today in the United States of America, are very individualized, are focused on an agenda, values autonomy, self-determination, independence, values partnership as equal, and getting down to business. But we may be coming to this process in a more collective kind of worldview, where we actually concentrating more on what we all want to do, what our family wants us to do, and that we may are used to having other people in my family making decisions for me. So when my clinician asks me, what is your goal? Well, I don't have my tia, my abuela, or anybody else on my team to help me. That's why the importance of the person-centered recovery planning as bringing the family together. Also, for some of our cultures, Latino cultures, and it's definitely my experience, there is a value on hierarchy. And if my doctor and my clinician tells me that this is what I have to do, this, I know, look, el doctor diga, that's what I'm going to do. So all of this takes praise and our part. So if I'm addressing the spirit of motivational interviewing as a partnership, I need to understand these expectations, because it's about building a partnership, but we are going to come into this partnership with this expectation. Oscar, I want to check in with you just to make sure if you want to add in any of these principles as far.
Yeah, I think this is a great spot for me to answer a question. I think there's a theme that you're alluding to, and I think the question here is like, how do you bring back a client back to the topic we are addressing? Sometimes clients evade and refuse to discuss current behaviors. And similarly, I think you mentioned when we're planning or we're engaging in treatment planning, clients don't know. I think this is a great opportunity for us as clinicians and as providers, or you know, to ask ourselves, is getting to the treatment plan, is getting to the question that we're asking, is that based on our own agenda or the client's agenda, right? So I think this is where we need to check in with ourselves and ask if this question that we're asking, if they're evading this question, is it because we need an answer? Another way to think about this, and this question usually comes up whenever I do motivational interviewing presentations, is like, what about with clients who are resistant or who refuse or who evade the question? Great, you can put that aside, and you can say, like, you know what, we don't have to talk about that. Tell me why you're here, or tell me how I can best help you. You know, you put that question aside, or you know, that question related to the behavior. You put that aside, and you simply ask, how can I best support you? How can I help you? How can I help you meet your goals? Or tell me more about you. And I bet you that 9 out of 10 times, you're going to come back and address that behavior, because that's going to come back, right? They're going to end up telling you a whole story, and then they're going to come back to the behavior because that is what brought them in. So 9 out of 10 times, if you put that aside and you engage in a conversation of like, how can I best support you? How can I best help you meet your needs? Or what is it I can do to help you get out of here, right? If it's something that they just need to accomplish or attain or get a signature, what is it that I can do to help you? And 9 out of 10 times, they're going to come back and answer your question. And same with treatment planning. With treatment planning, if clients don't know, great, you can put that aside, and through just getting to know them, those treatment goals or those treatment goals will start to surface simply by getting and asking clients, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What has it been like? And you're gonna start hearing these stories, and you're gonna start putting themes and patterns together, and that's gonna help you inform your goals. And you can again use amplified reflection, use different types of reflections to start building those treatment goals. Hopefully that answered that question. I'll put it back to you, Maria, and you're muted.
Yes, thank you, Oscar. Yes, great. So, so lastly, yes, I think that was a great way to go that. So I think we have then reviewed the three pieces of it. And the last one is plan, is having a plan. So this is why we wanted to just show you, because I think a plan was that it's finally deciding to make a commitment to change. Now, with that said, that making a commitment to change doesn't mean the person is going to be all set and ready to go back to work tomorrow. It means that they have a direction where they're going to, you and the person are going to be moving forward. So, and I love the commitment, because many times I hear people saying, well, they are just not committed to this. I think sometimes what happens, this is very related to acculturated. Do people really understand what we're doing and how the system works for them? Because linguistic barriers are a huge barrier for that. So I think it's important to understand before we said they are just not committed to the process. Are there other issues going on and other barriers that are taking place here? People in recovery really need to have access to all the treatment records, and we know linguistic barriers are a huge issue about that. Sometimes all the notes are done in English, right? So just start with that. If they are not a community that is, for example, it doesn't speak English. Sometimes Latinos can be fluent in English, and we know that. So it's not like every Latino has to speak in Spanish. However, the documentation and the processes sometimes are not available for the person. And that's also happened for many people that are also English speakers. So are we reinforcing as we talk with people? I think Oscar was referring to that. I mean, are we really following and trying to really match our perspectives with the person's perspectives? Are we respecting that perspective, honor where the person is? Because the idea here is to meet the person where they are. So a very important this is all about the person's choice, the client choice. That's what recovery-oriented practices at the essence of it all. Plan is just one example, but it's all about respecting and understanding the person's preferences. So what is a plan that's using these principles that are both, again, based on motivational interviewing values as well as in recovery-oriented values? It starts with the goal that's defined with the person. A goal is not eliminating symptoms, it's not eliminating a diagnosis, it's a goal as simple as, I want to take care of my grandchildren twice a week. Quiero ser la abuela, I want to be a mother, okay? So the goal is what the person is, wants and desires to fulfill as a person in their life. It's not eliminating symptoms. Then you talk on the strengths of that the person brings, and that includes the cultural strengths that Oscar referred to, and then the barriers. That's when the barriers and the symptomatology is going to be included, because symptoms may be barriers to achieve that, and that's how we are approaching this. So if you see, we are merging both recovery and treatment together. And we come up with very concrete, smart objectives. It's not the conversation today. They're very specific objectives with a timeline. And then you kind of list the action steps that people, and those are going to be the responsibilities, the action step that the family is going to have, the person is going to have, the clinical and rehabilitation services, and all those providers that are going to be part of this treatment. So this is just an example, and I'm noticing that we only have 15 minutes around this presentation. So I want to make sure we have time for questions and discuss, because this is the first of many conversations. What is beautiful about this initiative we're doing with the other two mental health TTCs is that we're going to be continuing this conversation. Then after, you have another presentation coming up next week, and then after that we're going to be facilitating some discussions. Oscar is going to be doing that with the Latino Hispanic mental health TTC, which is one of our partners. And in addition to that, we're going to be doing like a public health campaign that's being developed by our colleagues at the Region 2 Mental Health TTC to really promote these concepts all together about these tools and the importance of recovering, hope and opportunities for people to think about recovery. So I think, Oscar, what I would like to do is just to perhaps maybe just stop my presentation and see if we can do this somehow. Vanessa, I don't know how we do. We have a lot of people on the line. You can contact any of the three mental health TTCs here, and clearly either Oscar or myself will put our emails on the chat box. So I am going to stop this presentation and see if we can have somehow a way for us to connect with everybody. I'm not sure how we can do this. I still see all this via chat. Okay, so it's all via chat, Vanessa informed us, but we're here. I see our friends from Puerto Rico, Daris, hola, I see Kathy and Daris are all our partners in this. Questions, more questions. This is the beginning of the conversation. We like to talk, people, Latinos, conversación.
I can also allow people to unmute themselves and speak up if they would like to. You can do that by raising your hand in the application, and then I can unmute you so that you can ask your question if you'd like, or you can ask it in the chat. Either way works for us.
Vanessa, that's great. A wonderful presentation from Lourdes Robles Velasquez. A great presentation. This is exactly what our community program is all about. We love to get to know what you're doing. Lourdes, maravilloso. This is exactly what this is. And peer support is definitely very much compatible. And I know Oscar is very fan of peer support as well. Nami Santa Clara, perfecto. Welcome.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Alvin Lee. I'm actually a social worker in the Boston Public Schools in Boston. And one thing that we run into in the school systems, and I'm sure this happens in a lot of areas, is that clinicians and the populations that they serve are usually disproportionate. And so at our school, there is a large contingent of Latinx students, but very few clinicians that speak their language. And so how do we, from those that come from a different cultural background, tap into, a culturally responsive and culturally logical approach to motivational interviewing that, allows them to kind of have, more buy-in. And I think, often when I meet with my students, they're like, "Hey, you're Asian. You're not Latin. You don't understand my experience. You don't understand that I had to, go to different countries just to come to this country, and then have to deal with teachers that don't speak my language, and then I get, poor grades." And so, if you guys can speak on that, in terms of what tools or techniques that would be helpful, I think I welcome any suggestions that you guys.
That's a great question, and thank you for bringing it up. And I think so when we talk about, so I didn't really get into the MI technical skills because that's just a whole other thing. And I think I'm going to try to answer two questions. I saw one here, I think something similar regarding, I believe it was, what other skills can you use aside from reflections? Well, part of the MI technical skills include open-ended questions, include reflections, include affirmations and summaries. And just hearing your question, my go-tos would be great open-ended questions. Tell me a little bit more about that struggle. What was that like? Help me learn. Tell me more about you, and tell me how can I best support you, right? Or help me understand, right? These are like great open-ended questions that you can use. They're not closed-ended questions. Oftentimes, we ask closed-ended questions where we often get yes or no, and then or in those situations, you can also use affirmations. And affirmations are so powerful. And the thing about affirmations is we really want to be very specific about affirmations. We want to affirm a behavior. We want to affirm something that we can see, something that's tangible, and something that's honest, right? A great affirmation in this, a great open-ended question, and you can also bring in an affirmation here, is like, you're right, I don't understand, help me understand, or what is it, or how is it I can best support you? And then affirming is, yes, a great affirmation is like, yeah, you've had to travel through so many countries and you're here, right? And that speaks to that resiliency piece without saying you're resilient, right? You're putting that reflection back, and you're also affirming their ability to overcome the challenges that they're experiencing, right? So we're drawing from past experiences. So the technical skills include open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, and all these are very powerful, and you can use them to engage in. The thing about motivational interviewing is that it all goes hand in hand. And it may seem very easy. It's actually very complex because you have to be thinking about the spirit, you have to be thinking about the processes, and you have to be thinking about which MI technical skill you're going to use to engage. So my go-tos in those situations would be great open-ended questions and affirmations. Hopefully that answered that question.
For the most part, but I think I had a follow-up component, which is, most often times my Spanish is inadequate, and especially if you want to convey things in a complex or maybe on a clinical level, a lot gets lost in translation, and all the fits and starts of trying to Google Translate and just to pin that word down, you kind of lose the flow in the moment, and so it's like it's really mucky, and for me, the consumer is the one that suffers from that process, and I want to refine that and at least to find tools that help smooth that out. Other than going full immersion in Spanish, I will, I'm all ears to any suggestions you guys will continue to throw our way. But I appreciate the response.
Yeah, and to add to that, I'm all about affirming, and it sounds like you're really invested in your students, and you're working really hard to make sure that they have their needs met, and you're trying to provide that support. So kudos to you. I haven't worked in school systems, and I'm sure you're going above and beyond, and that is amazing. That is more than many of us can say. And at the same time, I think you bring up a great question that this speaks to a lot of the systems issues and inequities in our school systems. The lack of providers or teachers or educators who have or are bilingual, bicultural, or have additional resources that we can tap into. So I think you bring up a great point related to access, and at the same time you're doing an amazing job, and hopefully your institution is recognizing that. And I also want to point out that there are some motivational interviewing. Actually, there is a lot of motivational interviewing information out there in Spanish. If you want to go into the Mint organization, there is so much out there that is already in Spanish that people can use and whatnot. So I definitely recommend using the Mint website related to it's specific for motivational interviewing. You'll find everything there in multiple languages and whatnot.
Thank you. And I didn't catch your name, the one. I'm also in Boston, and I want to tell you that we do have a school mental health initiative, and I know the Hispanic, National, Latino, I mean, all of the mental health CCC have. So please contact us, because we do have, I don't know how much we have in Latino, but I think maybe the National Hispanic Latino can actually, has developed things for school as well. So I think it's great you're talking today, and I couldn't agree with you more about the language barriers. And I admire and congratulate you for just trying to get to connect with people. That just really means a lot. So I really appreciate it. There was a question that I think is important. María, ¿cómo motivar a participantes cuando no haya aceptado su condición emocional? The translation is, how can we, oh my God, now I lost it. How can we help somebody that has not accepted their emotional condition? My answer to that, I did answer to Maria in Spanish, but I want to say that accepting diagnosis is quite challenging. It's a journey. Any kind of diagnosis, never, even more if we know as many Latinos, that's what we're talking about, is stigma. So your question, Maria, tu pregunta es muy importante. We learned this in the first focus groups, that the stigma and the shame actually affects and impacts people seeking mental health services among Latinos. I think motivational interviewing and recovery is a very good way to have this conversation, because it's really about what is it that you want to be and do with your life. It's not about it's not about having the person accept that they have a diagnosis XYZ, but the conversation is about the strengths and what is it that they hope to be in the future. So this is a painful and a process. It's like any diagnostic or illness that we may face, but we do know that mental illness, especially serious one that impacts one's ability to function, are very devastating for not only the person and the family, and we need to do a lot of educating. That's what we're also going to be doing a campaign along with it.
And if I may add, Maria, to answer that question, and I'll try to say it both in English and Spanish, one of the things that, and accepting diagnoses is always challenging, right? And this is where, you look at the processes, you look at the stages of change, and one of my go-to questions is, what would it mean for you to be diagnosed with X? Like, you're asking them, what would it mean? What kind of impact will this have on you? What would this mean, or how would this be seen in your community, right? So you're doing two things. You're asking them on a personal level, and you're also getting at the the community response, right? You're also getting around the stigma aspect of things. So open-ended questions, and you're inviting them to have that dialogue. You're inviting them to have that dialogue around, what does it mean to have or to carry this label? How will it impact you? What does it mean for your family? And thinking about those things. So una de las cosas que pueden hacer en estas situaciones es hacer una pregunta abierta. ¿Qué significa tener esa etiqueta? ¿Qué significa para la familia, para la comunidad? ¿Cómo te van a ver? Esos tipos de preguntas están invitando a la persona a explorar ese proceso. ¿Qué significa tener esa etiqueta? And eventually you'll get to the, and it's not about accepting it. It's like, okay, how can we work and make sure that you have your needs met with or without you accepting this diagnosis, right? It doesn't have to accept it. It's how can we live with it? How can we live with it and help you and provide you the support that's going to help you be, if the goal is, or if the plan is to become, integrate back into society in a way that's more effective, how can we do that, right? That's going to be our role. Hopefully that answered that question.
Thank you so much. Yes. I think, Vanessa, this is pretty much, we're 2 minutes. I'm going to turn it over to you for any housekeeping questions. We're looking forward to continue these conversations. We want to invite anybody who wants to join this initiative with our 3 mental health the disease and continue the conversation. And if since we are training and technical, we are trainings and technical assistance centers funded by SAMHSA. Our role is to provide this kind of information. If you are, your ideas and input is very welcome, and that's what we're here to do for you. So we hope to continue being engaged with you, absolutely. So any final words, Vanessa, in terms of certificates and the GIPRAs? Yes.
Yeah, so at the end of the event, when the screen closes, you'll receive a link, or the link will open on your screen for the evaluation. And we are very grateful if you can take just a few minutes to fill out the evaluation so we can continue to provide trainings like this one today. And then via email, all of the registrants will also receive information about how to request your certificate of completion or participation during today's event. And then we'll also be sharing the recording and PowerPoint slides on our website. And again, all of that information is going to be on the follow-up email. So if you registered for today's event, you'll receive everything that I'm talking about. No worries. And then we can also post on our website any other resources that we mentioned today. And again, if you have any questions, you can always access our website or email us, and we're here for you.
Thank you. Please feel free to reach out, and I'll try to be as helpful as I can. And if I'm not able to, we'll find someone to help you all out. Thank you for the opportunity.
Gracias, Oscar. It's a pleasure presenting with you, and to Kathy and Daris and Graciela and everybody else involved in this process. We thank you very much, and we hope to hear from you. Muchas gracias. Feliz tarde.